Hi, John, and welcome to the Dandelion podcast. Thank
Hi,
you so much
Sally.
for joining me.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's gorgeous to see you again.
Yeah, it's so nice. It's so good. I'm so excited about this chat. Yeah, I wondered if you could just give us sort of a intro into yourself, who you are, even your hobbies, what you do, that kind of thing.
This, as a, I always find this the hardest question of all, really, because human beings are not summable up in a way. So it's always, what do we actually mean by that? So, in a setting like this, I would say I'm led a spiritual life his whole life. Just I've always felt the pull of my own soul to actually be here on the planet instead of lost in things. And yet, for all that feeling that I've had in my life, I was very lost for a very long time, even though I was
Mm.
a minister and I tried out all sorts of different religious ways of doing things and so on. So um, I'm somebody whose hobby is to be here on the earth at the moment. Um, and I write books. So I've written books for a long, long time. I used to be in literature. I'm what's called a Royal Literary Fellow, and I still do some of that work. I work with the Royal Literary Fund. I'm a commissioning editor for them through a project called Writer's Mosaic, and I publish books. I'm not a publisher. I mean, I write books that are published. So I've had 8 books out, the most recent of which was Signposts of a Spiritual Journey, which I guess we're kind of talking about, or that's how we've met through a retreat based on that. And I kind of hold spaces for people to actually be themselves in a proper way, and I'm really interested in people who are interested in what's real, and sort of, if you can call that spiritual if you want to. Words like that kind of fail for me in a way, but you have to call things something. So my entire interest is just authenticity and reality and the soul, really, live through our ordinary human lives. I'm not into weird special things. I'm into us.
I love that.
And hobbies, what hobbies have I got? I've got the most beautiful Fender Stratocaster that I play. And I still play cassettes, and I still make cassettes, like mixtapes. I still do that. I like music very much. I'm a big fan of the Grateful Dead, who I find to be the most life-affirming music I've ever come across. And I like walking in nature. So that's it, really. I'm kind of not a big hobbyist, just a few things that I deeply love.
Mm. Yeah, well, they sound like great hobbies, to be fair. I also love walking in nature. It's the best. So, yeah, so as you said, for the listeners, we met at a sort of day retreat, which was based around John's book, Signposts of a Spiritual Journey, which I did have next to me. I was going to hold up, but I've lost it. It's by my bed, I think. So I read that book and it had a really big impact on me. I read that this year, and I found it really, really helpful because I have felt like I've been going through a very long, ongoing spiritual journey or awakening or whatever you want to call it. And it really sort of enticed me with the title, because I was like, signposts, yeah, okay, so I'm not going to be just like this lost wandering soul trying to work out what's going on, and and it completely delivered in that sense, because I felt that it was just a nice, like, sort of as if you were kind of like holding my hand, like going through different stages and different things. And I think that's why it probably appeals to so many people, because it's nice to have that. Yeah, it's not like a step by step or how to, but it's just that kind of like guideposts and signposts. I loved it so much. I gave it to my dad. I basically recommended it to everyone I know. So yeah, when I saw your day retreat, I was like, yes, this is what I will definitely do. This is great. And it was just such a nice day. I really loved it. It felt really yeah, it just felt really kind of restorative. And you're not, I mean, obviously I've read your book, and then I as you always do with authors, you kind of hold them in quite high esteem, and you're like, oh God, it's like celeb. But you never came across like that. You were very, very open, chatting to everyone, and which is why we're here, because I obviously felt confident enough to ask you to come on my podcast, which was like, is only just begun. So yeah, so that's kind of how we met. And I wanted to ask you kind of a little bit, like, some questions on Signposts, and then some more broad questions, I guess, about connecting with your authentic self, connecting with spirituality. Obviously, this podcast is very broadly speaking about connection overall, but we can just go in whichever direction we want, really. So my first question would be, what does connecting with your authentic self mean to you?
This is probably like the question that kind of was underlined all the work. And it's really quite simple for anybody kind of listening or watching to kind of feel into, because, you know, it sounds like it's going to be some great big answer, but really, in order to kind of know what's authentic in you, we also, each one of us knows what's inauthentic. We know that kind of dull clang of inauthenticity when we're at a party at Christmas and we do the fake laugh, or we're sitting with somebody, a group of people somewhere at work, or a group of friends, or we're on our own, or whatever, and there's a kind of a disparity of power because of you know, the way those things sort of run, because of tribalism, because of conditioning, because of, you know, dominance of different kinds, which are violent a lot of the time, and kind of, you know, self-abandoning sort of ways of being in the world. And so, you know, the way that the world is built, the kind of the appearance of the world is through the conditioning that's kind of laid down upon us. So what I mean by our authentic selves is not a kind of sort of wild, insane, crazy person, but it's knowing who you are with that conditioning. So knowing that there's more to you than that, and then seeing if any of that conditioning actually has any value to you whatsoever, because we take for granted that we are the people that we are, but we're not. You know, we talked about this on the retreat. You know, life is a bit like a kind of a little shopping basket that you're given when you're born, and your name is put into it with the family name, and then the family says, this is what it is to be, you know, a person in this family, and then the society says, this is what it's a person is to be a meaningful member of this society. But all of those things are conditions built on conditions built on conditions, not necessarily coming from a place of truth, not coming from a place of wholeness or whatever, but all sorts of other egoic plays and reasons and stuff going on. And so we all feel that. Every one of us feels that. And it's not that there's something wrong with us, but we believe in those somebodies. And I've always just been interested in who we actually are, when we're just actually with each other. And this goes right, you know, there's an old practice from Tibet called Ati Yoga. Well, it's pre-Tibet, before there was even a country called Tibet. There's this practice called Ati Yoga, which we did on the retreat, whereas we actually sit in kind of being with each other. 4,500-year-old practice. And you know, there are meditations we can do that they don't rip the conditioning off us, but they let us actually just sit a bit more within ourselves so that we're aware of that. So the goal isn't to smash all this stuff down and kind of destroy it. But once we actually start knowing what's real in us by admitting what's not real in us as much as anything else, then we begin to kind of transcend that limited self, as it were, because those things only have the range in them that they have because they are forms that have been built for us, whereas we're a different matter altogether. So I would say kind of the revelation of who you actually are through a line of, you know, a gentle line of authenticity is what this is all about.
And it can be quite a in my experience, I'm not going to speak for anyone else, but it can be quite a painful experience in the sense that depending on what you've been through in your life, you may have been sort of conditioned or outright told that your authentic self isn't enough, or it's wrong, or it's weird, or whatever. So, for example, I felt that way when I was really young, and then I've been kind of, through things like bullying and like other traumas and things like that throughout my life. I've felt the need to suppress my real self to try and fit a certain mold, and to, yeah, just, I guess, become someone that fits in or is likable, because that makes life easier, right? But that makes it a very deeply painful experience to live if you're the kind of person like I am. I don't know if this is like a normal experience, but I don't like being inauthentic. It makes me feel really weird. Like it's a lot of energy, and it just, yeah, it sometimes I struggle with being your authentic self, because I almost feel like you have to just be around other people that get you. I don't know if do you see what I mean?
I hear what you're saying, and no, so if we were kind of doing a longer retreat together or something, we would kind of work on this across a week or something, because if we are dependent on outside conditions for our authenticity and our sense of self, then other people have always got power over us. We are manipulable because of that, and trauma and pain body stuff can actually build into that in a really strong way. And again, we can't just wish and hope that those things aren't there and kind of shift to another place. So it's a process of kind of daily kind of gentle, loving transcendence with these things, of just learning how to be present and then noticing where you're not, So you'll notice that in certain situations, walking on your own in nature, it's easy to be aware, authentic, fully yourself. Oh my, look at I don't know what it's like for you. I actually see like the life force in things. So I actually see like the life between trees, and I feel like the energy of the river and all sorts of things. And it's like walking through a world that's alive, and I'm not separate from it. I'm as much of that life as everything is alive, So I call that God, basically. I'm walking through the what is. That's my other word for it, the what is. And forms kind of emerge out of this dynamic living expression. When we feel inauthentic, the thing we've got to do is notice where we lose that sense of life. So in the workplace, like we have to, somebody has taught us that to enter into this space, you have to reduce yourself in some way, or put that part away and be this. So have a choice of how you turn up in that space. So you can try and, force an authenticity into that space by putting your kind of spiritual elbows out, but you'll get hurt if you do, and you can try sort of preaching who you are into that space, and that will hurt you as well. But if you actually just space and you work at just sort of being present within those spaces, then what's quite amazing is that stuff, it begins to not touch you in the same way. It's like it just moves straight through. While you still have resistance to it, in a way, you're thinking it can hurt you, but you start seeing it for what it is. That the more you come to the ground of your own self, the more that stuff actually doesn't touch you at all. And so you could just be looking, and you can see a person who's completely invested in that way of living, trying to kind of get one on you or something like that, and it will just won't touch you. It sounds like a little miracle, because it is in a way, but you're not actually doing anything. It's about the grounding into your being, So what you've been talking about expression and so on, it's about you learning to meet your own being repeatedly in different situations. And after a while, it starts becoming fun for you, You'll go to places where you lose it every time, just to kind of see, okay, I'm not going to, every time I go in that space, I try and hold on egoically, and whoosh, I'm washed away. So this time, I'm being with you know, that person who always sets me off at Christmas time, I'm going to go and see that person, and I'm just going to use it like a meditation, you know? Feel we have to defend ourselves, or we feel we have to react back. Well, that's our egos rather than our being, you see. So once you kind of go, oh, look, I keep doing that, and you go, okay, I'll tell you what, I'll just feel into the life of my body, or I'll just, you know, do that circular breath thing that John showed me, or whatever, and I'll just be here in myself. And then crazy uncle guy or Jeremy Clarkson or whatever kind of starts kind of doing their business. And you can just look at them and you just see that they're trying to be something because really they're scared of living. You know, these people, they're afraid of life. You know, their conditioning has made them afraid of life. So they try and control the world through all this noise and all this way of doing things, right down to actually threatening you with violence for the smallest of things. You know, so they don't have power on you anymore.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And since you brought up Jeremy Clarkson,
he's just a very frightened little old man.
Yeah,
you know,
I was going to ask
old man
about
shouting
this.
at clouds, you know, in The Simpsons.
Yeah, it's very tricky to, I think, from the perspective of someone that is sensitive to energy and is more in touch with the spirituality and all of that kind of stuff. How do you deal with, I guess there's no other way of saying that, how do you deal with the world being so filled with hate and negativity and polarizing opinion, and you know, when people are just so obsessed with putting more and more hate into the world, like Jeremy Clarkson, or about the whole Meghan Markle thing, I found myself feeling like so much anger, which is not, you know, ideal, but it's also a human emotion. So obviously I can see something happening, I know it's not right, I can see the injustice, but I'm also trying to battle with being like protecting my energy. I don't know, how do you kind of confront being in this insane world, basically?
Yeah. Well, as I've just described to you, you know, what I've found is that I actually don't need to protect my energy anymore, because those things don't actually affect me in the same way. I'm aware of them. You know, it's not that I can't see it, but I also see where it's actually coming from. And so for, you know, that kind of person who creates division continuously, they've been taught, or they've learned that gives them power in the world. But we can all see that that's a very dysfunctional person. Unfortunately, our society has learned to trade on dysfunction and give that roles of power and celebrity rather than celebrating wholeness and healedness. So you have to kind of call it for what it is. There's just a very, very broken sort of person there who you know, will use anything they've got, whilst actually having an incredible sexual obsession about somebody. And, you know, because that's what that is. There's some weird obsession sort of there. So the person who actually needs taking away for treatment. You see, so, you know, we're talking about what should be done. Well, you know, if that was me standing in the street shouting, I would find myself in the special ward, you know. But because this person has got wealth and money, and we mistake those things and celebrity, so we those things for some form of goodness, perhaps, and credit things that it actually hasn't got. We are at fault for doing that, you know. So we are creating that apparent world through our celebration of it. We've limited our systems so that they're manipulable by these kind of structures. But once you actually are grounded in self, and that can even, you know, be therapeutically as much as anything else, you see these things for what they are, which doesn't mean that they shouldn't kind of whatever. But we've made a world where that kind of posture and illness is both celebrated and be untouched because of the wealth around it. Whereas if it was you or me, if I threatened that person who caused that in the same way, I would have a visit from the police, you know? so that you can see the kind of the duality that's at play. What's kind of going on at a soul level, though, when we follow our true path of our own lives, as I call it. So the spiritual path is not outside of us. It's about living this incarnation and doing the curriculum of this incarnation. That person is never actually meeting themselves in any way. They're doing everything to run away from themselves all of the time, thinking that if only I can achieve a big enough celebrity, get enough viewers, get enough money, get enough this, get enough that, that will be enough.
Yeah, it concerns me how many people are in power or in sort of high esteemed places in our society and culture that are very, very much not awakened in any sense, and are very much, like you've spoken about, like in their pain body, or in their ego and things like that. And it's concerning. I think I guess for me it's difficult then. This is why I stopped like watching the news and things like that, because I'm just like, I get so just concerned about it, and it just like, then that hurts me, and I haven't found a way of being able to like sort of be part of topical events and news, but actually kind of protect myself at the same time. But I used to work in journalism, and I worked for news for a long time. And since I came out of that, that has helped, because that was full on every day. So yeah. So I wanted to talk a little bit about your book. As I said, it was completely like transformative for me. I wanted to know what you kind of, what was your thought process behind it, and who did you kind of write it for?
I wrote it for you.
For me?
Yeah, personally, for you.
Me personally, great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny because people say the tone of the book is like not like a book that they've ever come across before, because it speaks directly to the person reading it. Instead of just actually listing things, it actually talks to you, doesn't it? That's quite an interesting thing, and quite a few people have kind of said that to me. But I'm not kidding, because I actually say at the beginning of the book that this book is for anybody who's genuinely, asking the questions that you're asking. Who am I? What am I here for? What's life really about? And so on. And it doesn't seek to be instructional in terms of this is the answer to those questions. It actually, it kind of breaks things down into a number of signposts. So, if you're experiencing this, then you're likely to be experiencing these blockages. This is what we might do about these blockages. And then this is what is going to come next. But then you're going to experience these blockages, So it's not about rushing to some kind of mythical end. It's about meeting you exactly where you are, if you're wanting to actually live a non-abandoned life, a life that's actually your own. And when we live through conditioning and so on, then we're self-abandoned. We're not in ourselves. So I call that self-abandonment. And there's only two ways of living: either living as self, or there's abandoning self. That's it. And so all this stuff that we talk about, the news and this and that and the other, those things are all designed to cause us to abandon ourselves into their energy fields, and even sort of resist back from them with a kind of defended hands up posture. We are still abandoned because we're not prepared just to kind of to be. Those things actually can't touch you in any real way. It's our imagination that they can, that allows that to be, and our conditioning. So that's why that kind of deeper healing kind of needs to take place in a way. But what does Shakespeare call it? So full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. And Marcus Aurelius talks about bread and circuses, and so on and so on and so on. So if you think of the news as sound and fury, and actually, if you think about the news, if it is actually the news, because, you have the conditioning of the presenter, the conditioning of the scriptwriter, the conditioning of the producer, the conditioning of the corporation, the conditioning of the government that tells that news agency what they're allowed to say. So where's the news in all of this? All you've got is this thick layer of, people's egos and stuff. And what that kind of, somehow that kind of masses together and tries to present its version of the world to you, mostly saying, be afraid, be scared of living, don't go out of your house, don't do this, don't do that. And when you come back to yourself, you're like, this is interesting, because here I am, and yet I'm told that, you know, things are other than they are. So we have to kind of start seeing for ourselves. That's where the authenticity comes into it. And so, you know, there's ways of kind of noticing what's authentic. So that's what Signpost is for, in a way. It's not trying to destroy that world. It's not trying to make anybody spiritually special. It's not trying to set itself up as anything. My intention was completely genuine, that it's a friend who walks beside you on the journey, you know, and it's not even about liking me. I'm not interested in celebrity other than being well enough known so that people can access the materials. So if I have to use that mechanism so that people can actually access the materials that brings them into their wholeness, because for each person who moves a little more into their wholeness, then that world that we're talking about lessens, it gets thinner by the degree of you. Each person listening, each reader, each person doing a genuine meditation or a genuine prayer, or even if they don't have a spiritual tradition and just thinks to themselves, I want to be real, I want to know what this life really is. For each person who steps into any kind of step forward with that, they change the world. If we actually just turned our resources to here and nowness and being with each other and actually solving problems, then there wouldn't be any problem. You know,
I resonated a lot with what you said about kind of wanting to use the vehicle of like social media or media in general to kind of put little bits of good or little sparks of things that might, I guess, like how I see it is like little seeds of I don't know, like spirituality or different way of thinking into the world, because otherwise how are people ever gonna find that? You know, the right people will come across it, but you know, if we can share bits and bobs of awakened thought or like more kind of higher vibrational thought, then at least then it kind of makes it more accessible for people, I think. And I was going to talk a little bit about spiritual awakenings in general, and I'm starting to feel okay with saying spiritual awakening, because I felt a little bit cringy when I first said I've had a spiritual awakening, but I have, or I'm still having one. I think we all kind of like, it's a process, but for me it was a lot to do with getting sober. So I got sober about 2 years ago, so we're coming up to 2 years in a week's time.
Congratulations.
And thank you.
That's no small thing at all, is it?
No, it's not. It's not. It's really not. And I also lost my I had a cat who was like my best friend, and he was just adorable, and he died very suddenly. And all of that coincided with this huge shift in me to become who I always have been. I've done meditation for years, like, but I've always been interested in spirituality and Buddhism and things like that. But I kind of lost that. I kind of did a repressing of all of that stuff. I was like, no, let's just push that down. Let's blanket over all of these sort of uncomfortable thoughts and feelings, all of that, with essentially alcohol, and you know, and other dysfunctional ways of coping. So then when I got rid of that, that's when I started feeling like all of this stuff started coming back, and that's how I've just started, you know, like in the last couple of years particularly, been diving into so many more books and like really getting into like meditation as more of like a regular practice, and yoga and all of these things. And it's been amazing and eye-opening, and I love it. But it's also been quite intense and terrifying at times, because I think there's certain periods of, I found, like when you're kind of going through that, where you feel very alone or weird. You feel like you can't really fit in with like normal society, which makes me sound like I'm trying to say I'm special, but it's not. All of that being said, what would you say how would you define like a spiritual awakening? How does someone know if they're going through one, for example?
There's so many levels that this could happen at that kind of it's really hard to kind of speak into. There are definite indicators for sure. Compassion, the arising of compassion would be something. See, the thing is I think a lot of what's going on out there is that we think by reading books and things that actually adds to our spirituality or our experience of the sacred. But it doesn't. I mean, they can be like friends on the journey, but you cannot add anything to yourself. And I've seen a lot of people make that mistake of, like the number of kind of insanely priced yoga retreats around the world where of people who all look exactly the same, having cacao ceremonies with altars made out of this, that, and the other, but they believe they're being spiritual, but they're actually all just sitting with other rich kids like themselves, kind of, trying to add something into themselves. So, and I'm not saying that somebody within that setup can't actually awaken or feel what's real, because the thing is words like spiritual awakening, it sounds very grandiose, For me, I kind of felt this when I've always felt like this. It's always been, even since before I was this being. I actually remember before being here, and I died 8 years ago. Yesterday, I actually died, and then came back, which I talk about a little bit in the book. So it was my rebirth day. And the thing is that I've never been different. The outer form has been different, and this version of a being has been lost, but that core or that truth of who one is has never changed before this life or after this life and during it. And so when you start to get a sense of that core of your being, I would say that is the primary indicator, and it will come in different ways. So if you write early on at things, you're kind of quite a new being, here a few million times, say, then you'll be asking questions like, well, I see all this, but this is not who I am, or who am I really, or what are we really here for? So it'll be just very basic sort of questions. But then, you might get little flashes of a sense of something truer. But then what you do is you spend a number of lifetimes trying to squash that back down. So you'll go through a few lifetimes of different addictions, or buying into alcohol culture or whatever kind of thing. Then you might kind of come around again, and somehow it's a little bit clearer in you. So you live through the religion. So you might be a Buddhist, or you might be a yogi, or you might be a Christian, or you might be but you'd be a real one, which is very, very different, cultural one. There are two levels to every religion. So you might be a real Christian, actually practicing or feeling the heart of Christ within you and expressing that, as opposed to somebody who says, I am a Christian and I will kill all the rest of you, kind of thing. Or I'm a Muslim, or I'm a this, or I'm a that. So you become a real something, or it may be that you appear outside of all those structures, like you seem to be, like I seem to be, and yet you still know that there is something, I mean, God's not the name of God, There's a line in a song by the singer Tom Verlaine, who was in the band Television. There's a song called Song, and he says, God is not the name of God. And when I heard that song, I was like, oh my word. So all the names that we apply for things, that's not, so my name for that is the what is, and just what is, and without being added to. And so you can find yourself anywhere along the line of that. So how you would know it is, if it's through a thought, then it's not really knowing it. But we know the difference between gnosis and not knowing is very, very clear. So when we know it, and we don't have to believe anymore. So if we belief, it's not an awakening. If it's knowing, actual fully, you know, even if it's only like a little bit at the time, but it's there, then that's an awakening. It's a huge difference. I was trying to talk about this on our little retreat, and it's what I want to talk about, because we have to even we don't give up belief, but belief is transcended by knowing every single time. Look, if you're wondering if you're having spiritual experiencing, it's in that knowing. There's like a quiet voice inside each that actually that calls us on, and we all know that voice. We all do, and it asks us, you know, to kind of just be and to be ourselves. So it's the it doesn't really even take courage. It's allowing that. It's allowing ourselves to follow it. And it's almost like the veils then begin to fall from our eyes.
Yeah. So what kind of advice would you give to someone that is or thinks they are going through a spiritual awakening, or, you know, some kind of transformation? Doesn't have to be a spiritual awakening, but yeah, and they're kind of trying to navigate that.
Keep a journal. For sure. You know, journaling is one of the very best things, and spend a lot of time in nature, because nature will always see you right. Because and just try to work with present. You know, just try to allow being here. So if you find yourself sort of trying to build beliefs or a kind of structure around something, then that's probably going to lead you away from what you're being shown. So I find a lot of people try to rush into things, and then they want to kind of get to being complete, because they've read somewhere that they're going to have this kind of experience, and the next thing you know, they've had like a minor kind of wake up. Then they built like a YouTube following on that waking up. And then, of course, it gets kind of covered over again because the conditioning kind of takes back over. You've got to keep your face up of being an awake person on YouTube. And suddenly you're in deep shit, you know. And there's a lot of that. And some people end up on the world stage with that nonsense, you know. Not naming any names. But look for yourself and you can see. And yet it's absolutely right that they end up there, because, you know, the person who follows a person like that, they're needing to learn what a teacher is who isn't really a teacher, or who hasn't actually got it, you know, who hasn't and is lying to them basically for their status. So that might be the experience that the person needs to have. So the individual actually going through it, it's just to kind of just keep coming back to the heart. You know, at the end of the day, there's one word that rings through everything. There's one word that we have that surpasses all other things. And I don't mean it in a washy way. And you know it when you know it. And it's a terrible word that demands so much of us. And it's love. If you stay with the love, you will be all right, you know? But you have to actually allow it to do its work in you. And if we take over from it, trying to rush onto something, if I only meditate harder, so, you know, you get people like, right, I'm going off on this retreat where you meditate for 10 days, 10 hours a day. And I'm through. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're just gonna, it's just you pressing your face up against some glass that you imagine is standing in the way. Whereas this all unfolds quite naturally if you just keep coming back to the here and now, and to love, and to authenticity. I'd say that there are three things that point the way: awareness, actual awareness, not thought, but the awareness that comes before thought and feeling; authenticity, and love. Those are the three that we've got. That's it. If any of those three things are present, then follow those.
Yeah. Made me laugh when you were saying about people that are like, I'm going to go away on like a 10-day retreat, or like going, it might surprise you to know, given that I've just told you I'm almost 2 years sober, I'm very black and white and very like all or nothing about things. So I was like, I have to pull myself back sometimes, because I want to be like, well, now I need to be the best at meditation, and I need to know every single thing that ever is about energy, and like, yeah. Personality traits can be quite tricky to work with sometimes.
But the thing is, when the awareness in you sees that personality trait, and you can laugh at yourself, you know, and you realize what a fool we are, you know, then you're probably much further on than you think, you know,
Yeah.
even a place to get to, because at the end of the day, this is a terrible thing. I cried my guts out the day this I was actually realized within myself that you've never not been away.
What do you mean by that?
That all you've been covered over, but you've never not been.
Mm.
And it's so profound, the realization of that, when it emerges, that it's utterly devastating for a few days. I wept for days, quite honestly, just that feeling like I'd wasted my life, you know, kind of, you know, searching. You know, I was in Buddhism then, and in this and that. I'd considered the priesthood when I was young, and all sorts of things. That the spiritual impulse was so strong in this being. But at the end of the day, life itself was my real teacher, and belonging to something wouldn't have helped me at all. In fact, all those things. But and I spent 30 years doing that stuff, and it never, you know, and I tried to be the best Buddhist imaginable, you know? And I was full on hardcore Zen, you know, 11 hours a day practice sort of stuff, facing the wall.
Wow.
And you know what got me? Nowhere. Although I love Zen as a practice, I think it is, if you want one meditation that is genuinely on point, that's really the Zen practice, if done right, is an astonishing daily practice that will help so much with what we're talking about. You know?
Yeah. Just maybe not 11 and a half hours a day facing a wall, maybe not.
You need you know, if anybody wants to meditate, you don't need any more than 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes at night. And if you check in with yourself by feeling into presence 30 or 40 times during the day, you know, you're at a stoplight, your cell phone rings or whatever, soon you start being in presence a lot more. And then the awareness kind of starts seeing even the presence. And so you realize the kind of the depth comes very, very quickly then.
And so from everything we've kind of talked about, and just in general, do you think that we are going through like a collective awakening, or how do you see it?
I think that's a really good marketing technique to use that kind of language, and I see a lot of it. So can I just the word teacher in the context of what I do is to be a mirror. And have you read Bell Hooks?
I haven't, no, but I want to.
Okay. Bell Hooks is fantastic. So she's got this book, you know, about love and so on. And she says that in order for things to change, of course, it first has to occur in our imagination first, right? And then we actually have to have the courage to try and move into that. So if you were to look at the world right now, right, with your beautiful imagination that you have, just at the world as it is right now, would you say that there is an awakening going on?
I want to say that there is, but it's going kind of parallel to a lot of bad stuff. I feel like there's like kind of two bits going on. That's how I would see it.
Yeah.
Some very, very close-minded, ego-based people and groups, and also some people that are figuring out and like becoming more aware, I would say. And it's sort of coinciding. That's how I would see it. I don't think
where are you seeing this awakening? Where are you seeing that?
Where am I seeing the awakening part?
Yeah.
Well, I guess just on a level of people becoming more open to talking about spirituality, or maybe talking about things that aren't, you know, what we were taught in school. Is not always, you know, just I guess on a day-to-day basis, if I bring up something that's spiritual in my conversations with friends or whatever, it's not like, what on earth are you talking about, you crazy hippie, like it would have been 20 years ago. It's now, oh yeah, that's interesting, I read about that, or, you know. And so in that sense, I feel like we're becoming more open, or perhaps a bit more knowledgeable about it. And like there's a lot more books I know that we were saying I don't go out and read all of the books, but like when I first started being more interested in, I've always been interested in meditation and things like that. But when I was like a teenager or early 20s, there wasn't really any resources like to find out more about it. Whereas now you've got everything. You've got like podcasts, you've got websites, you've got books, you've got like apps, you know, so it's more accessible, which maybe makes me feel like there's more of a desire for it. What do you think?
Can I say the word no?
Yes.
I think no.
Really?
Or I feel no. Yeah. I mean, not no, but not yes either. So in between the two, but it's not the. But in between is not maybe. I think the potential. Every single person, including the worst of people, have the potential in them for realization, because it's only a small amount of consciousness that allows a step towards the what is. But in terms of the apparence of the world, the thing that kind of creates the world, there are all these books and so on. But actually, the way that we meet those materials most of the time, as I seem to be seeing, and I would be wrong. I want to be wrong. I'm not even trying to be right. I'm only telling you what the impression that this being is receiving is that people read these books and collect it together as material, which they then repeat to each other, think because they've read it and assembled a systematized approach out of it, and then have created sort of a few practices or something. Until it shifts from the head to the heart, it hasn't got any gravity to it, hasn't got any depth to it. So it's not that the potential isn't there; it's that I don't feel it's penetrated the heart enough to actually be meaningful. But the answer to that then is that it falls upon each person who feels that they may be headed in that direction, to check themselves and to work through the heart. It has nothing to do with the head and with that kind of knowing or belief in any way, from the simplest person to the very worst person who has committed the most grievous crime imaginable. Not one person is out of the sight of the what is at any moment, you know? You know, and this is like the example of Jesus comes up here very beautifully, because, you know, who did Jesus go and talk to? It wasn't the people who he considered to be, you know, the people who considered themselves great and religious and so on. It was the prostitutes, the tax collectors, the poorly people, you know, and somebody even challenged him on this. Why are you talking to those people? And he said, you don't need me. You think you know everything, you know? These people, there's a way in here, you know, there's a possibility. And so it's through the reality of love that things will change. And I don't mean attachment-based love. I mean the actual flourish of love that comes from self-knowing. And so it's not really no, I'm saying, but it's not yes either. I don't see it, because if I was seeing it, the world would not look as it does right now. The world would look different. We would actually be capable of making that decision to work for our own benefit as a species, for example, you know. But what we tend to do is everything falls into duality. So I think spirituality is used a lot of the time as a way of copping out of life. It's a way of dropping out. And if you have a certain level of wealth behind you, your parents or something like that, then you've always got that level of comfort behind you. And so you don't know what it's like. And so you can feel very spiritual if you don't actually engage with the real world in any way. The reality of even our country at this moment is that people are freezing in their homes. In the last week, I've seen people crying on TikTok, literally crying their guts out. That guy last week who called in, did you see that clip?
Yeah, I saw it. Yeah.
And if I'd have been in Devon, I'd have been round there. That day, I went round to my local. We have two churches in my town. I went round to the two local churches to kind of say, okay, you know, I'm about to go away, but I'm around over Christmas. I'll just cook at night for people. Oh, the church,
Mm.
the doors weren't open, providing for people. So if we can't manage it on the level of actually just meeting ourselves, there's not much else going on, quite honestly. I'm a very practical, this being is a very, my mother was this hardcore, Northern Irish woman. I was born in this terrible northern town full of skinheads and race. And my dad was kind of descended from what are called the Pathans, who were kind of like the warrior class in northern India. And so there's this kind of like, kind of side. And so if I look, I'm just like, yeah, no, because unless it manifests into some kind of action, I don't believe you. Not you.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't believe. You can say everything. You can say all the clever things. You can say all the spiritual words. But if you read the Bhagavad Gita or the Upanishads, one of the signs of this being the dark time is that all of the teachings are available, but they have become beliefs rather than lived.
Mm.
These times is that the teachings are available and nobody's living them. I'm not saying nobody is, because there are people, I do know people who are, and I think people are genuine, but whether it's a mass awakening, I don't think we could call it mass. But the other side of that, by the degree of one, the genuineness of each of our approaches to what we're doing will change the world,
Yeah.
But we look in only the term of our lifespan. So we think everything has to be now, as it were. And the funny thing is that everything is now, because we're in the here and now, here we are, and that allows for change to happen. But there is a spiritual evolution going on within the life forms of this planet, but it's going to take a wee while yet, quite honestly.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm quite an eternal optimist, and God knows why. I just am. I think I'm always just trying to think, well, it's going to get better, and look, there's more people getting, enjoy discovering this stuff, and maybe that means that we're going in the right direction in some small way. But I know what you mean. It's yeah.
I think in small ways, yes. When it will get serious is when somebody who is actually authentic and that stuff doesn't touch them in quite the same way, actually stands as an MP. Instead of kind of, right, well, I'm spiritual, so I'm not going into that world, right? You actually feel the truth in you and you go, okay, I'll go in that world.
So is that how we make actual tangible change then?
Well, right now, the world is actually run by a certain set of mechanisms. So unless we're actually engaging with those mechanisms, they're not going to change. So if I considered running for MP for this area this year, I considered it, and I still might. Actually, it kind of occurs to me. But of course, I would appear to be a crazy person within that. You listen to the noise those people make on both sides of that house, and the kind of the low divisive ways that everything is played out. So, would it be much use? Well, to be a space of presence within that could be a very interesting thing. It could be very, very interesting. Whether it is the best use of me, I don't know whether that's the case. So I just ask into God or into spirit, what is the best use? Please use me in that way. And it still keeps coming up with holding spaces like the retreats and things like that, and holding space. But actually taking proper stewardship of the world, if we have some movement in us, would be a sign that I would think, okay, there's something going on. Be somebody self-declaring themselves as a spiritual person, you would actually see it through their actions.
Yeah, having a seat at the table is is one way for sure, isn't it? To kind of
Yeah.
make any change. We've seen that with just diversifying like workplaces and things like that. Just, you know, instead of this whole repetition of a certain type of person being at the top and then that just going on and on and on in this cycle.
It's
like
just
actually,
mechanical. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
It's mechanical.
yeah. It's not for me. I don't think I'm going to become an MP. I'm not going to lie.
No,
I don't think I could handle it.
why would you want to go in a space like that? But at the same time, you know, if you could sit down with each one of those people and you would find some reasonable aspect of, you know, that's the terrible thing about it. But there's an addiction to a certain way of doing things that is leading us to kind of, you know, destroy the species or whatever, and everybody else, all our kind of brother and sister species with it, you know, with us.
Mm-hmm.
And not non-dual, but a kind of something that kind of sits in its wholeness within those structures would change those structures. Maybe and maybe not. I don't know. I actually don't know what the answer is. It's just for me, I like action, and I don't see much of it.
Definitely. Yeah, you see a lot of people kind of doing good, but making sure that they've got, you know, their phone out recording the thing, and you know, it's like it's good, still doing the good thing, right? But at the same time, what's the you know, the intention behind it?
Well, hey, listen, you know, the American philanthropic system is an entire system of tax write-offs. So more people, please write off your tax. You know, if nothing, you know, we should be doing that. We should be writing our tax off by philanthropic means instead of hoarding and paying into a system which actually gives nothing back, you know? Right, let's write our tax each other instead then. You know, that would be a step. I wouldn't necessarily call it a spiritual awakening, but I'd call it a damn sight better than what we do.
I've got 2 more questions for you if you've got time.
I'm very happy. I'm more than happy.
Are you sure? Yeah. Okay, well, one of them is kind of selfish because I just wanted to ask you, when I was at the retreat, you spoke to me about a little bit about divine femininity. I was going to call it feminism then, but that's just so top of mind. But yeah, so you sort of spoke briefly about divine feminine, masculine, and I wondered, there's quite a lot of talk about this on TikTok. I'm obsessed, obviously. If you could give me a little bit more information about what it means.
There's actually there's actually an incredible movement on TikTok. I don't know if you've noticed it, of people kind of, you know, actually following like authentic femininity, authentic masculinity, you know, and I find that absolutely beautiful. I think part of our programming that's been going on for a long time is a kind of a kind of an idea of almost like a kind of a false expression of ourselves. So we end up with kind of beauty masks that are dictated to by whether we're men or women or however we choose to express, that it's a kind of it's a mask that's worn over ourselves instead of a realization of who we are. And so you know, just to explain more for people kind of listening, we met on this kind of like meditation retreat in London at St. Mark's Church in, what's the area called? Up near King Cross, isn't it?
Yeah, Angel.
Yeah, there's a centre called the Meditatio Centre, which is actually a Christian meditation centre. So I was really interested. They brought me. They're interesting people who practice for real, so they brought me in, and so I could just feel when I was when you were asking me your question that might be an interesting direction for you to explore, you know, because it is very easy to, and I'm not saying you do this, by the way, but it is really easy to live through what we are told, you know, and the most basic expressions of that in our world is as kind of what a man is, what a woman is, what a, you know, person expressing themselves in this way is. And so what we do is we bind into a kind of a cultural version of those things, and then kind of put the mask over ourselves. So I'm sure that you've seen people with almost like kind of, you know, hyper feminine masks added to themselves out in the city and so on. And you think, but then, you know, you noticed almost like a kind of a brittleness or a kind of a lostness behind that. So again, this is back into kind of abandoning behavior or abandoning kind of movement of conditioning, so that we can either have an authentic form of something or we can have a fake form of something, just like we have cultural religion and actual religion. I'm interested in actual religion, the movement of the heart, the movement of the soul. You know, whether that's Buddhist or Christ-like or whatever, doesn't actually matter, because it's all the same heart, quite honestly. For my own students, that I've kind of almost said, wouldn't it be really interesting to explore? I tell you where this is coming from when I kind of teach, when I work with my students. It comes from a place of wanting just real experience of people, and our human lives are the most real experience that we can have. The only experience we can have is as a human. So if we have something that sings through us, then we should really explore that. That's all that I'm saying, in a way. So whatever is genuinely singing through you, then explore it, because we have this idea of spirituality as being not human a lot of the time, whereas the truth is the actual opposite. It's the living the curriculum of the human being that we are that actually brings us to our wholeness. So to explore what it is, I don't mean taking on cultural masculinity or cultural femininity or expression. I mean actually discovering what that is within yourself and allowing that to. And I've seen people change so much because of this. So we might think, we got to do all this meditating and so on and so on. But actually, we feel into our basic life expression in this life. What would that show us? I'm saying to say you, for example, is to allow yourself the adventure, if you feel like, of following that line, because that was just something that I felt would be meaningful for you, in a way. In that retreat, you're very aware of people's energies and so on within that kind of setup, and that's a large part of what my work is. Not thinking on people's behalves, but actually just seeing what feels true and check the person if it's true or not. And you can see if it resonates or not, and then kind of almost like, here, well, should we just try this? So if we just treat it as an adventure, and then we can go on a process of discovery. And so I would say that if you feel like you're adding to yourself, then that's the wrong direction. And if it feels like something truer and wholer and more real, then you're heading in the right way.
Yeah, I like the idea of it being like a little adventure, or like a discovery.
Yeah, so all teachability is about discovery, and then beautiful, because it's really juicy.
Yeah. So one last question to wrap up, but it's a really easy, straightforward one. What's the meaning of life?
Oh, yeah.
What do you think it is? Yes, standard, easy question, really.
Yeah, to know yourself.
Oh, you actually do have an answer. I was expecting you to be like, wow.
To know for you to know yourself in the way that we're talking about, and if that sounds crazy, then just go to love, basically. A real love based in awareness and authenticity. That's enough. That's going to take you on such an adventure. You just won't know if you won't know what's hit you. Quite honestly, yeah. No, there is actually an answer. Sorry.
Damn it! Here's an answer for everything.
Also 42.
What's that?
42.
Did you say 42?
Yeah.
What is a random number, or is that actually the official answer?
No, official. According to Douglas Adams, the answer is 42. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. I need to look that up then.
You have to look that up now. Just look. If you look up 42, you will actually find so much material on the number 42 and Douglas Adams.
God, yeah. That's interesting. Love that. Well, that's a great way to end this. But thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. It's been amazing. It's been so eye-opening, and I think so many people will really resonate with what you said and find it so fascinating. Would you like to tell us some of your social handles so that people can find you?
No, you just type into a search engine. That's all you've got to do. I mean, you can list all these things, but if you just type, we all got Google, so you just put John Siddique there, you'll find everything. It's not hard, and uh, yeah, and it's really funny in a way in that I don't chase after people, so I'm happy to work with anybody who just is turning up in their own lives, and if they think, oh, I wouldn't mind walking alongside some of this for a while. That'd be really lovely. But I want to thank everybody who's listened to this today, and kind of tuned in. You individually, you are the answer, the person listening, and there's nobody here trying to tell you what to do or how you should be. But if you feel it in your heart, and you feel called in this way, then follow that. Just follow the adventure of it. Because it's not some terrible hard work. It is actually the most beautiful thing in this world. There's nothing more valuable than this. As we can see people being the richest people in the world, making absolute fools of themselves. We can see people with absolute celebrity, not actually having anything of any heart in themselves, and all the range in between. And yet we've got something far more beautiful and profound, the greatest treasure. And it's you, dear listener. It's you, individually, you.
Thank you so much. And yeah, hopefully we'll connect again soon.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful, Sally. Thank you so much.